Good morning, Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're at the top of page 1228, Aleph Reish Chav Ches. What we covered yesterday was this. We now have covered all three levels, Mutva, Murgish, Muskel. He called Muskel HaMurgish HaMitzad HaSeichel. So I'm still wondering whether there's a higher level than that. But regardless, he said, "Amurgish mitzad ha-seichel." This is not the seichel that is just to make a child aware, or the divine soul aware of its natural love. That was mutva. That was the hatfa that we spoke about in the paragraph on page 1126 and 1127. And the 27 and 28, 1127 and 1128, that were the paragraph we just learned yesterday. There he's talking now. He says, so the mind is now mature to a point, and this is actually what begins at age 13. Up till age 13 is still the level of murgish, in stages. That here now there's a seichel that impacts and awakens and stimulates the midas, and there's difference between different individuals. And that is the difference between the bar mitzvah between 13 and before. Chinuch, as he said, you also recognize a child as before bar mitzvah also is responsible for mitzvahs medivrei sofrim, do the chinuch medivrei sofrim, the mitzvah of educating them. But there they recognize good and bad more on a very practical, basic level, not in a deeper level, like he said, the example of wealth or poverty. We said that they don't appreciate wealth to the point that they'll pursue it and protect it. They know that it's a good thing. So it's like almost like a type of behavioral knowledge or awareness of, I don't want to use the word behavioral because I don't want to confuse it with mutva, but it's essentially, like he called it, he says it's tever da, but they don't know, ein lo havchana v'hakaras b'mailas hatev. And by 13, that enters into the picture. And that's why one is taka responsible. Whereas in chinuch, you only have the basic knowledge, and that's why there's a responsibility from a divrei sofrim level, but not minat teira. Okay. He has achoris haseichel, so he has some recognition. But when you know mailas hatev v'giroyin hara, which will cause somebody to be drawn to the good and avoid the negative, that's the gili amurgish mitzad haseichel, and that's why it's mechuyev b'mitzvos min hatera. V'hu b'yesei bein she'oz nishlam b'agdola zu abchinas amurgish mitzad haseichel. He does say the expression that is nishlam b'agdola zu, that he's grown. This has been completely that level of growth, that the murgish mitzad haseichel. So you have to say that there's a higher level because that's what happens after bar mitzvah. Like he says, will be continued to grow. Or what he said on page 1225, Muslak Dol Samech Atzman, that begins and that concludes until 20 years old. But regardless, it's gone beyond just murgish in the sense where the feelings are dominant and the seichel is just supporting that. Here you have a seichel that is a stronger seichel, a deeper seichel, that is able to distinguish and recognize, and therefore becomes responsible for mitzvahs. As far as the Shulchan Aruch goes, that we said, I didn't really have a chance to look at it, so I'll still need some time on that. But clearly he does explain the difference in Shulchan Aruch between a mitzvah leisa, said where there is just enough to know it's forbidden, no, it's just basic, it's not right, and the mitzvah sesa, it's yedei ksas mailas hadavar. So you see, even in a child that's before bar mitzvah in chinuch, you also have two elements. Something that he just basically knows this is not for you. And then there's a little knowledge and yes, awareness of the quality of something. Not obviously the same level that comes later when a person is bar mitzvah, but 13, but still a level of understanding. But as I explained yesterday, this doesn't happen in a jolting fashion. It's all a gradual progression of growth. So that's why when a person is reaching 12 years old, they're already much closer to the higher levels where the mind is appreciating and affecting the emotions in that way, in contrast to when you're, let's say, 4 or 5 years old, or even 6 years old, where there's some recognition. So you have to keep in mind that it's a constant progression in recognition and an awareness of the mind, which impacts on the emotions as well. Yeah. Murgish mitzad haseichel. Murgish mitzad haseichel.
As opposed to the Yetzer Tov that comes in boom at Bar Mitzvah, or according to some people?
Well, he's talking here about the Nefesh Elokis. This is all talking about the divine soul. The divine soul, as it progresses from basic behavioral obedience, so to speak, to some emotional experience, to more recognition, as it goes through the murgish, more recognition, more feelings, the feelings that come from contemplating that this is my life, chayecha, that God is good to me, God is sustaining me. And the divine soul continues in this growth until it begins to appreciate godliness on its own, the goodness of it on its own. So by bar mitzvah, what we say is that it's the gemar. It's when the nefesh halikis comes into full glory, where you can be held responsible for your behavior. Whereas till now, the nefesh halikis, he called it bechinas katnus. It was not yet developed within the person fully. So we're talking here about the nefesh halikis.
But Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have a different view of it. I forgot what it was.
A different view on what?
On the emergence of the Nefesh Elokis at Bar Mitzvah. One I forgot.
I don't think it's to do with the Nefesh Elokis. They have a different version of where the soul comes in through you mean through the navel or through the nose? Or by
I'm talking about what and when, what part of the life.
That you'd have to show me. I don't recall seeing a difference Beis Shammai Beis Hillel around the Nefesh Elokis. Okay. If you find something, let me know. I just let me know. Okay.
What is it about when the Yetzer Tov comes in? Some say by the bris and some say by the bar mitzvah.
I just said that. We talked about it several times. It does not some say. It says tchilas knisas nefesh halikis is by the bris, and gemar knisa is by the bar mitzvah. The Alter Rebbe says in the Shulchan Aruch in the beginning.
Okay.
So it fits very well here. It's progressive stages. He first spoke about it biologically in general, about human development, emotional and intellectual and cognitive development. And now he's speaking clearly. He said about, he talked about Neshama Elokis. He started on page 1225. Gimel Madreges, Mutva, Murgish, Muskel. Behavioral, emotional, and cognitive. Those are essentially the 3 stages, with all the overlap that we discussed. Okay. So I'm going to continue reading now from page 1228. Ukamoy Kain, the beginning of the paragraph. Ukamoy Kain hu beruchni is, and so too is it on a spiritual level. Because he's been going back and forth between development, the child development, and the nefesh halikis, it looks like. So beruchnius. Let's see what he means by beruchnius. There's a natural love and awe that don't have any intelligence or perception at all. Like we see, that there are a number of people in their nature, they get excited with a type of love and attraction to godliness, without any comprehension or contemplation at all. They just naturally are drawn and attracted to something, to God, to godliness. V'hi spilus chitzenius. This is an outer surface level excitement. She'ein ba mamish. That doesn't have substance. The miyad chelef ve'ever, because this type of like feeling and attraction, inspiration, immediately chelef ve'ever dissipates and moves on and passes by. The eina poel by eze pu'ula nikeres, and does not have any recognizable, discernible impact on the person who had this inspiration. In other words, you see people at times, there are a number of people who can have a divine inspiration and just feel for a moment something, I want to be close to God or attracted to him. There's no contemplation at all. And then it passes, it dissipates. The moment of a moment, and that's that. And nevertheless, you can't say it's completely nothing happened. He was excited ba'ava with a love, with an attraction. And you can't compare it. It's very different. It's different than someone who was not excited at all. At least this person had a moment of inspiration. So he says, this is v'zehu b'chinas helam hamurgish shebemidus. This level is called helam hamurgish shebemidus. The concealment of the level of murgish, of feelings in the midas. Why doesn't he call this mutfa? That is just a natural thing. Because he's now introducing another level here. He says, helam hamurgish shebemidus. Because mutva, there's no feeling at all. That's why. Mutva, he said, it's just embedded the seeds, but he also said it's concealed. Okay, because here it's not concealed. There is a revealed, something was revealed. The person had a feeling.
Why are you calling it helam then?
Right. Let me just see one thing here. I'm thinking, like 15 lines from the bottom of last page, he did say, Ha'inyan hu dihini ba'gdolos ha'midis yesh b'zeh helam v'gilui, heim ba'murgish de midis, v'heim ba'murgish shemetzad ha'seichel. El kamei b'gashmis hari b'yaniki yesh izgalos ha'midis. Sein the korim, gam nira. No, because I don't have a full answer to this, I would suggest let's read on and hopefully we'll understand. Not clear myself exactly what he's saying. I mean, I have a few ways to explain it, but I don't want to speculate. I'd rather be more clear, more definitive. I don't want to speculate what he means here. So he's talking about some emotion that's there, but it's only temporary and it dissipates. So he calls that b'chinas helam hamurgish shebemidus. Let's read on and we'll get back to it, okay?
Yeah, it could be the helam is afterwards, before there's no helam, and then it dissipates, and then you call it helam. That's all.
Maybe that's what he's saying. That once it goes back undercover, it dissipates, it goes away, is the helam hamurgish shebemidus. But then you don't have a feeling altogether.
Would it call it fleeting emotions?
Yeah, it is a fleeting emotion. But why is he called helam hamurgish shebemidus? Anyway, as I said, I could explain it, but I don't want to jump. Let's read on. I'll go back because there's a few things that are not 100% clear to me. The previous page, he also said that there's gili helam gili murgish hamidus, and then he says, "Kamoi begashmis hari biyanikish is galos hamidus ksas, v'gam nida be'ezeh kares sichlis lakshaza adayin behelam." So I'm thinking, since he said begashmis and now he says kamoi kenu beruchnius, maybe this is the continuation of what he said before begashmis. I'm thinking that that's what he's doing right now. I think it's all connected to that. I will read through it again. Let's continue reading because I'm not. There's a few things that need to be clarified. Okay, so he says like this: Omnam. However, b'chinas hagilui b'zeh. What is the level of gilui? It looks like he's saying that since it's fleeting, and since it's temporary, that's called helam. Even though there was a spurt, a moment. But because it wasn't sustained, he's calling that a state of helam. So it's helam hamurgish, because there's a murgish, but it's not really a manifest one. Omnam, b'chinas, what's a gilui? B'chinas hagilui b'zehu kasher yesh b'zeh ezeh izbanus. However, by contrast, what is the level of gilui and revelation of this midas? What he's calling here murgish? Is when there's some form of contemplation. Like we learned before, you're our father. To love God because this is your sustenance, He's your life, canal. So there's something you're thinking about. If we don't have this thought, he's going back to what he said, it looks like at the bottom of page 1226. If you don't have the thought, so you can have a fleeting moment where you feel something and then it dissipates. It stays concealed. The mizbaranus is giving it body. It's giving it something to hold on to. Because you're contemplating on that God as your father. You're contemplating, He's giving you sustenance. And the same thing on the opposite side, yira. The chem be yira. Mashakosov yiru ma'ashem kol ha'aretz. That the whole land is afraid of God, is in fear of God, because He's the one that said, you are existent. God is giving us existence. So we are, I would say afraid is not the word, we are respectful and afraid that God would pull back his life force from us. So Ava is the attraction to the life force that's sustaining us. And Yira is the fear of the opposite. So there, the hisbanus, the ma'at, what he called eze hisbanus, some contemplation has given it some handle to hold on to, that the ava, the gilui, there's a gilui in this murgish. Whereas without any contemplation at all, it comes and goes. That's what he's saying right now. Now, what level this is exactly, it's, he's definitely citing the level that we spoke about, mutva having some seichel. Well, actually, no, murgish, I'm sorry. Yeah, murgish, the revelation of the natural emotions, and that's a state of gilui. It does sound like he's talking about the helam and gilui in murgish itself. That's what it looks like he's saying right now. So helam would be without any contemplation, and gilui would be there is some contemplation. That's what he said here. Achzehu, however, all this is b'chlolus b'chinas hamurgish shebemidas. This is all in general the second level, which is murgish, where the midas are already apparent. There are feelings. We're not talking about the level of mutva, the newborn child, where there's no feelings yet. There's no expression of any emotions at all. It's like seeds in the ground, like in the state of pregnancy. Here it's general murgishim is that ikar b'zehu, hisedus hatva. The primary force here is the awakening and stimulation of that which was embedded naturally embedded, the natural emotions in wired in. And what is this revealed state of feelings? The love of vitality, in other words, the love and connection to that which sustains us, and yiras heder, and the concern or the fear of lacking that. So that's the feeling right now. I want to be connected to my life force, and I don't want to be disconnected. So there's an attraction, there's an emotional, basic emotions, but it's really essentially survival. It's like you would speak on the biological level, a person's survival instinct. Survival instinct has feelings. You want to escape danger, and you're drawn to safety. But how sophisticated are those emotions? The cognitive is only there to make you aware. If you remember, he said you could be standing near a lion or near thieves and not be aware. So the cognitive now is just enough to get the emotions, to keep the emotions alive, that you should be feeling that you want to be in a safe place and not in a dangerous place. In Avodah, you want to be close to God and not distant from God. That's what he's saying now. That's the basic of murgish. So it's essentially the natural motions that have now become apparent. If you don't have contemplation at all, they come and go. Just like we spoke before, like I said, you can be near a dangerous entity, and at this moment someone made you aware, so you're careful. As soon as you lose awareness, you cannot be careful. In other words, the awareness is critical. You need some cognitive recognition that you're in a dangerous place, or in a safe place, or a healthy place. That's what I believe he's saying here. Yeah. And the seichel here is only on a very survival level, just to contemplate that this is your life force. It's to tell you that this is a safe and healthy place for you. Canal. This is the murgish, the level of murgish and midas. It's not mutva. Mutva is the basic seated emotions. Murgish is when you're feeling them, but you're feeling them on a very survival level, on a very basic level. So it's revealed, but not in a way that you could talk about. Like we said, the child does not really appreciate that the value of it. Just knows that this is my safe place. This is where I go to. It's like a child aware. This is where I go for safety, and I stay away from here, from danger. Okay. So this is the level of murgish b'midas, but it's in a state of gilui. He's qualifying, in other words, not in a state of concealment when you don't have the contemplation that he said above. That's what it looks like he's saying. Oh, I think I see where he's going now. Language is very... Okay, the next line. We're going to have to go over this again, but let me continue and plow through this. V'zeh atzma, and this actually b'chinas gilui, and this itself, he b'chinas hahelam de murgish mitzad haseichel. I think he's saying that this very level that we just called gilui, it's gilui mitzad the midas, the feelings. And it's gilui because you have some seichel. But if you talk about the seichel, that comes later, where you understand something and appreciate for what it is, not just on a survival, what it does for you, but for what it is on its own. That level, he says, so in this first level, he's speaking, there's a level, it's actually more than, there's the level where it's concealed, there's no contemplation. It comes and goes, it dissipates, it's fleeting. There's the level where you have some contemplation on the basic survival of it. In other words, this is good for you, this is not good for you. So there's an emotional expression. It's called murgish begilu, he calls it, but you can't call it murgish mitzad seichel. Because remember, murgish mitzad seichel is when the child begins to grow and appreciates it for what it is, not just the basic good, right, and wrong. I think that's what he's saying. Because in this state, at least, there is some recognition of seichel. So therefore, it's a helam the murgish mitzad seichel. I'm continuing to read, and I'm going to go back to the language once I get the clear picture. And then he grows, he goes and continues and grows, progressively grows, until the point where he has akaras sichlis, a recognition, a cognitive recognition. And that due to this, he should be awakened, it should be aroused, his emotions, love, because the quality of the thing, not because it's good for him, not because you feel and sense it's for your survival. No, but it's not just survival instinct. It's also a qualitative cognitive appreciation, like we spoke before about wealth on a physical level, the same thing spiritually speaking. Okay, yeah, I got it right, yes. And this level, once he begins to appreciate the thing for itself, because his mind has grown and developed, and it's not just the basic biological, or as I said, instinctive survival emotions. So now, you now come to the level of a gilish ba'amurgish shemetzad seichel. Now what you're having is the murgish that's due to seichel, that's allowing you to appreciate the thing, is being revealed. Shayisedus idea is bonus of the key. Shamurgish shemetzad seichel, shayisedus idea is bonus of the key. The awakening that comes through a divine contemplation, not just contemplating that God is giving you life, like you would think of your mother and father are giving you life, so you're drawn to them. No, we're talking deeper. It's through Hizbanus Aliki. Im she'Hizbanus be'inyan isavus ha'elamus. Or whether the Hizbanus, the contemplation, is about the creations of the worlds. You're contemplating how the creation, the general creation, is only coming up from a reflection. He's giving now examples of what does it mean, Hizbanus Aliki. If you remember on the previous page when he said, Muskol Shebemidis, he said, this is when you are, let me see, the words were, Seichel Alikisha, that a person's understanding a divine concept. So now we're not talking about the divine as it serves you and gives you life. We're talking about God on God's terms, or not necessarily on God's terms, but God on his own as he's a creator. And you're contemplating how all of creation comes from nothing more than a reflection. Like we learned earlier, Malchuscha, your kingship, God's kingship, is Malchus Kol Elamim, is the king over all worlds. The Melech Shmoi Nikra Aleim. The king is his name king. He's called the king, he's called the king of over them. He's been declared king over them. It's only his name. It's only by name, because we don't know what his personality is like. So we know he's our king. So all this is about, now we're talking about godliness. We're not talking about God giving you life, or God sustaining you, or or you're staying away from things that are dangerous, that can take away life, God forbid, or endanger life. This is all the contemplation he's talking about. Oh, one second. You know what? I see this goes for a while. The next big section here, all this, till next page, is all going to give us a contemplation of what does it mean to think about God on his own, which is not possible for a child. This is only possible once the mind begins to develop the level of what he calls the Hamurgish Mitzad HaSeichel, the feelings that are now coming by a mature mind at thought. Now, we all see this all the time, in the very basic physical level. You can see a difference between how a child, let's say, makes a strategy and a plan for a business and how an adult would make one. A child can talk about technical things, but to have a very comprehensive understanding of any topic requires a more mature mind. Here he's applying it to godliness. That we're talking now the higher level, the level that after mutva, murgish, the murgish mitzad seichel, in reaching and understanding and appreciating God. But since he's going to talk now about this contemplation, I want to stop for a moment and hear if anybody has any questions, because now he's going to talk about what does it mean to contemplate on God, that not as God relates and gives you life, but God as a concept that you are looking up and thinking about and contemplating about the divine and realizing how God is beyond us and so on. So we're appreciating God for what God is, or at least for God is beyond us. And that's what he's going to be discussing now. But since he's going to go to that, I wanted to just stop that, make sure we have an understanding of what we so far have discussed. Any questions? Okay. Helen Vigili Mitzad HaMurgish. I'm beginning to understand when he said before, there's Helen Vigili, Hein Ba'amurgish de Midas, Hein Ba'amurgish Mitzad HaSeichel. So I think if I were to apply that, it sounds to me that there are like 4 levels here. The Murgish of Midas, that is Behelim, would be when you have no contemplation at all, so it's a fleeting, passing emotion, like he described now, what we just learned. The Gilui in Murgish is when there is some contemplation, that God is giving you life and sustenance. So that gives the feeling some concretizes it somewhat. So it's Begili. So that's Murgish Behelim and Murgish Begili. That's the Murgish Mitzad Hamidus. What he says, a Murgish the Midas. And then there's the Murgish Shebemidas Shemitzad HaSeichel. Here, there's also Helam and Gili. The Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel is in the earlier stages of the child's life. The Murgish is concealed because the thinking is only around what is this for me. Now he says, Helam the Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel. And then there's the Gilui of the Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel when you're beginning to contemplate on God, on God's terms. Meaning what we just said, creation, understanding God, not just as it is for your survival. That's what I think I think this is being structured now. So now we're going to talk about this contemplation. Okay, so now he said the following. Let's start again. The contemplation consists of the following. Im sheis bonus binyan. The im means that he's going to talk about several different ways that you could have this contemplation. So he began with the contemplation is that the Savas is all is a contemplation around the creation of existence and how all of it is just from a reflection. Only Malchus, it's only God's Malchus, only God's outer surface expression, only Shmoi. And then he goes on. This is all part of the contemplation of muskel, of Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel. Yeah. Not like this, it's not like the comparison to a neshama, soul that manifests in a body, shachayis mislabish beguf mamish, where there the vitality, the energy of the soul gets enclosed literally, completely in the body, to sustain it and give it life, to the point that the soul is affected by the experiences of the body. So this is an expression brought from the Rambam, I believe, and other places Chassidus brings, that the soul feels, let's say, the body's pain or the body's joy. So you see from that it's a totally slapshus. The soul is not aloof and detached. It completely manifests and experiences the experiences of the body. Shemispol, it gets affected by it. Avalamayla ain't. But in this contemplation, we realize that Lamaila by Hashem, it's not that way. Ki kodesh muvdal, because he always remains holy and removed. Kodesh from the word Havdalah, separate. So this is all contemplation. This is something that you can expect from someone that's bar mitzvah. The contemplation continues. And even though through a sin and a transgression, it causes that the oil should be removed and concealed. And he explains in the parentheses, again, all part of the contemplation. This is referring to the oil pnimi. So it's like when you have, let's say, energy inside your arm, and then there's an injury, the energy doesn't disappear, but it gets concealed and like leaves your arm. It's like the blood rushing out of your arm. God forbid. That's pnimi. The gamma makif, and also the divine transcendent energy, which is not manifest within each creation, hu b'chinas helen b'yeser. Duta chedvav, and also gets more concealed. It's already concealed initially because it's a makif. It never enters. But through sins and transgressions, it becomes even more concealed. Ukidu being solik le'elo le'elo. This is actually very relevant to our time. When you talk about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the expression is solik le'elo le'elo. The Shechina, solik, left, higher and even higher, to emphasize that it was not just the concealment or one so-called exit, but higher and higher, goes into its own inner shell, so to speak. Like similar to what we learn in Basi Ligani, that after the Mechava, the Chet, Eitz Hadaz, the Shechina went from the earth to the first heaven. Second generation of sins to the second Rakia Shashin, the second Rakia. Similar idea. Solik la'elo la'ela. So we see, so even though there is a concealment, you just said that the activities of this world don't affect godliness. The neshama is affected by the experiences of the body. But Lamaila, they're not affected. What about through Chet? Though we have Agam, like he says, that through Chet there is an impact. That does not cause an impact. Ispilus, meaning an impact or any type of Spilus usually means excitement. Here, Spilus Bayer means some type of change or impact in the oil. Like I said, with the injury, it doesn't cause that the energy of the soul gets impacted. It causes it to be removed. Like he says, a keli in a ruya, when the keli is not fitting, the air gets removed from it. But not that it gets impacted by it. It's like electricity. Let's say if the appliance breaks, the electricity just leaves the appliance. Doesn't mean the electricity in any way is damaged or affected by it. So in neshama beguf, the neshama is affected by experiences of the body. But when the maila, the air is removed, but the air is not impacted by it. And delve into what it says in the Maimer, the Dibra HaMaskal that begins, Erdana, that's a Maimer from Vayera, B'drush HaBeis. It seems that this would be the Maimer in Torah but I'm not positive. I have to look. I think it's the Maimer in Torah second Maimer there, the second Drush. But the Rebbe Rashab continues. This sounds like a tangent because he's not speaking anymore about the three stages. He's talking about contemplation, but still, he's giving us a full contemplation on the divine. And he didn't finish yet. He says, okay, you're saying it doesn't impact the Elokhi, the divine energy. It just causes it to be removed. In other words, it's like the Beis Hamikdash. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Keli. And B'meila, the Shechina left. But you can't say the Shechina was destroyed, God forbid. But he's not satisfied. He says, but there's a pasuk that says, Machtuli. Machtuli means you have pierced me. Like a machat, a needle. Shachetu kemachat bebasar achai. A sin is like a needle in living flesh. Imagine sticking a piercing and sticking a needle into a person's skin, into a person's, right? It will hurt. And it says clearly, Machtu, that when you sin, you're like piercing my heart, not heart. You're piercing my skin. Basar Gashmi, Basar Achai, the flesh of a living thing. So what are you saying? It doesn't have effect? You said it just removed. It does have an effect. It's like a needle piercing so-called God's flesh. Not that there's flesh, but a certain level in the divine. So he says, Zeu b'chinas ha'ara de ha'ara, m'b'chinas chitzenis ha'kelim. That effect is indeed true, but it's affecting the reflection of the reflection that come from the outer dimension of the containers. In other words, there is a dimension of the Shekhinah, of the divine, that is affected, but it's a very outer dimension, not the inner dimensions. The mashabah b'chinas islapshus mamish by elamis, because the energy that does come, literally, bislapshus by elamis, the divine energy that manifests and enclosed mamish by elamis, is hu b'chinas ha'ara mitzumtzemes b'yeser, is a very diminished reflection of the divine energy. Just before we continue, like we say, man neshama malas haguf, kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu ama malas ha'elam. Just like the soul fills the body, so too does the neshama, does God fill the world. So there's a level of the divine energy that is compared to the neshama and therefore has an impact. But he's saying it's a very outer and surface level divine. Like he says, he continues. What's the impact? What level is it impacted? The combination of the letters of speech that God used to create the world, where he invested the power of the producer in the production. When we say Yehi Ur, Yehi Rakia, so there's a place of the divine where the divine actually manifests and gets enclosed like Kayach HaPoel Benifel, not in an aloof and detached way as we've been discussing. Commotion is barley ill, as was explained earlier. Okay, this is the contemplation. So what is it? Let's sum it up. This is not talking about God, that you are giving me life, and by being close to you, you shelter me and protect me. That is the isbannus of the level of murgish, not mitzad ha-seichel. There, the seichel is only necessary to make you aware and keep you aware of the importance of God in your life. In contrast to someone who doesn't think about it, and then any emotions are fleeting. So this creates la'ava ki hu chayecha. I love you because you're my life and sustenance. You're giving me life. You're good for me. Like we learned, toiv li is good for me. This contemplation is not talking about you. This is talking about that all of existence, including you, created by God, and it's only a reflection. And God is far beyond it. And even that not like a neshama that's impacted by the body's experiences, God is not like that. And even when there's a sin, it's still, the effect is only on a very external level because God is beyond it all. That's the contemplation. Now he's going to show what comes from this contemplation. He's now going to explain, here's the emotion that is aroused. And this is a higher level of emotion than the emotions that are naturally embedded within us. So he says, I thought it goes further, but he is tying it together. And through a lengthy and a comprehensive contemplation in this, Miseder ba'ava, he gets awakened. Miseder, he gets stimulated, aroused, and awakened. Ba'ava v'tshuka gdela, with a powerful or strong love and longing. Liyez gile lekuz be'elam, that in order there should be divine revelation in this world. Because now that you realize that we are only like a reflection or a reflection. So this causes a true yearning and longing and love to have a Gilei Elikus, which means mitreges al yenes. You want to connect, and you want a revelation of the higher levels, not just the artist as he's expressed in the art, but also deeper levels of the divine. Yeah. Because then, when you have the revelations from higher levels, you're going to have that revealed in the world. The world itself was created from lower levels of the divine. God's speech. It's only his external speech that he used to create. But now that you know that through your contemplation, you're longing and loving something far more. It's just like when you love someone. So first you begin by loving because they helped you, they sustained you, and then you realize, 1 second, this person I love for helping me has a lot more going on. I want a connection with that as well. I want to love and connect. I'm loving and connecting to that which is beyond what that person did for me. And that's this deeper level of love that's awakened through this contemplation. I think I'm going to stop right here before the parentheses and allow if anybody wants to ask anything. Okay. So what he said so far is now he's gone to a more sophisticated emotional experience, not just one based on basic biological and survival needs, and the love that comes from that you love God because of that, and therefore you behave. It's like, I would put it this way in Avodah. You have Jews who are very dedicated and committed and faithful Jews, but it's really very much on the on mutva, and even murgish level, which means they grew up with it. They follow, they do everything, surmara, asay tov, they do mitzvahs, very mechanically. They have some contemplation because they want God to bless them. Every Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, make a deal with God. They're going to be good people, and God will bless them. Children, health, mezene, parnasa, livelihood, and all the blessings we need. And the relationship with God is on a very basic level. It's also something great because most people in this world are worshiping themselves. So this person at least is a relationship with God, but very much like a child with a parent. I do what you want, and you take care of me and bless me. That's on a katnus level, G'nai Yisrael. As we grow in our emotion, in our divine experience, we then come, that includes a contemplation of Huchayecha and so on. But you want to come to a deeper connection to God, then you need to start understanding and relating to God a little more than just like a child to a parent. We're talking now a child that's growing and developing and beginning to contemplate and say, what is his God like? And you want to have a relationship with his God. That is what we're talking about now. We're seichel, we're more a mature relationship than just the basic mechanical, or you can say behavioral relationship. Behavioral and emotions, but also basic immature emotions or survival emotions, essentially, which is also a relationship with God, like a nefesh, level of nefesh or ruach. And now we're talking neshama more, where the seichel is coming into play. You're thinking about God, you're realizing God is beyond, you want to have a deeper relationship, a higher relationship, and so on. That's just on a very basic level what we've learned so far. Okay, that's, I think, a good summary of that. Any questions, any comments, anything? No? We're all good? Okay. So we'll stop here before the parentheses on page, close to the bottom third of page 1228. And I see it's going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to mature. We're going to continue to mature in our relationship with the divine. And I'm beginning to see that this will ultimately reflect the schar we get. In other words, as we grow in our relationship with godliness, we also grow in our relationship with the godly revelation in our lives. Remember, we learned all about Tainug of Gan Eden. So there's going to be Malchus, Zah, Bina, all the way to Tainug. Yeah, that's where I think he's going with all of this. As we grow in our appreciation of godliness, it's like a student expands their mind, they begin to experience higher levels of godliness. Okay, so we'll stop here. Again,